Hello everyone, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Michael. Today I'm going to show you how to pickle these sweet peppers, and we're also going to can them so they'll be shelf stable so you can have them this winter when you don't have the fresh produce. You might have some of these growing in your yard. These are sweet peppers. If you've got the banana peppers, those work just as well. You can get these at the farmer's market. You can get these at the store. And I've got 1.5 pounds of these, and I'm getting ready to cut these up, and I'm going to show you how to prepare these. But first I want to start with my water bath canner because I need to get my water coming up to temperature because it's going to come together really quickly once we do that. So I'm going to show you a little bit about my canner that I've got here. And with your canner, you want to make sure that you have a rack in it. You don't want to put jars if this is your first time canning. You want to make sure you get a canner with a rack in it. You don't want to set the jars down on the bottom of it because once this starts boiling, they could start moving around and you definitely don't want those cracking or falling over. So if you've got a canner, make sure that it has a rack in it for that. So with that, I'm going to make a small batch today. So if you want to double this, you can triple, quadruple, however many peppers that you've got. Just do that. I'm going to give you the basis of the recipe today. And we're going to be using these 1/2 pint jars. I like the smaller ones because they're easy to manage. Once you open them, you can use them up fairly quickly. We can use these on sandwiches. We can put them on beans, stews, soups. There's just any number of ways that you can use these pickled peppers. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and put my jars in the bottom of my canner. Like I said, I've got 4 of them here. And I'm going to put those on opposite ends of my canner. All right, now that I've got my jars on the rack in the bottom, now I'm going to go ahead and start filling it up with water. And I'm going to fill each one of the jars up with water so they don't start floating once we fill up the whole canister with water. And with that, you want 1 to 2 inches of water above the top of the jars. So when you start filling up your canister with water, your jars will already be full. Just fill up your canister with water so that it's 1 to 2 inches above the top of the jars. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start filling up my jars now with water. Now that I've got my jars filled with water, I'm going to go ahead and take it to the stove where I'm going to turn it on. And you want to bring this up to about 180 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 82 degrees Celsius. And we want to kind of hold it there. And once we heat up our pickling solution that we're going to be having there with our vinegar, or our water, our sugar, and our salt, we're going to be adding that to our jars. So we want to add hot liquid to hot jars, and that will keep it from potentially breaking the jars. So I'm going to go ahead and move this to the stove. Finish filling up my canister with the water 1 to 2 inches above the top, and I'll come back and we'll start prepping our peppers. All right, now let's start prepping our peppers now, and you can do this any number of ways that you want to. I like to take the little top off the peppers themselves, and then I'm going to remove the seeds out of them. And with removing the seeds, I'm just going to take a knife and just kind of cut that membrane around the top there like that. And with that, you should be able to just pull that seed thing right out of there, just like that. Now once I've got the seeds removed, I'm going to cut these into little ringlets, just like you would see the ones that you get into the store. And we're going to cut those where they're about 1/4 of an inch thick like that. So I'm going to continue to work on these. You want to cut all of your peppers up, just like that, and we'll come back and we'll move on to our next step. All right, I've got my peppers prepared now. I'm going to set those to the side and we'll get started working on our brine for our pickled peppers. And if you've got extra jars, you might want to put those aside depending on how big your peppers are. As we stuff those down into there, you might need a little bit more than the 3 or 4 that we're going to be making today. So just have some prepared, ready to go, just in case you need to have extra jars ready to go. So let's get started working on our brine. Now that the peppers are prepared, let's get started making our pickling solution now. And when you're heating up this pan, you want to make sure that you've got something that's stainless steel. You don't want to use anything that's aluminum. We're going to be putting vinegar in here, and that's really acidy, and it might put an off-putting taste in your pepper. So use stainless steel if you've got it to heat up this solution. And with this, we're going to add in 1.5 cups of white distilled vinegar. Well, that's 355 milliliters. I've got 1/2 cup of water, or that's 120 milliliters. I've got 1/4 cup of sugar, or that's 50 grams. If you want it a little bit sweeter, if you like it on the sweeter side, then go to 1/3 cup. That's 67 grams, but I've got 1/4 here. I've got 1.5 teaspoons of pickling salt. You want to make sure that the salt you have doesn't have any other additives in it. That's why pickling salt is a choice for this. It doesn't have any of the iodine or any of the other preservatives in it. If you want to use something else, just make sure that the only ingredient that's in your salt is salt, nothing else. 1.5 teaspoons. And we're going to stir this together until this dissolves. All right, now that that's all dissolved, I'll set this to the side. I'm going to go grab my jars and we're going to start packing them and putting in our pickling solution. Stick with me. I'm also going to add in just a pinch of turmeric, just to add that little bit of color to it. That's completely optional if you don't want to put the turmeric in it. And let's give that a good stir through. I've got my jar lids here. I'm going to put those in water and I'm just going to bring those up to just a little bit above room temperature. We don't want those boiling. Back in the day, that's the way it used to be, but now they don't recommend doing that anymore. So I'm going to heat these up just a little bit with your jar lids. When you're canning, if this is your first time canning, you always need new lids. You can use the rings over again if you need to, if they're in good shape, they don't have any rust on them. But the lids, you want to use those one time and one time only. Now that we've got our pickling solution made, I'm going to go ahead and grab one of my jars. I'm going to put a link in the description box below. I've got several videos on my channel where I go through all the equipment and things, but you definitely want to have a set of these. These are jar grippers. They've got a nice grip on the bottom here. You don't want to use tongs because tongs, the jar could slip out on you while you're holding it and it could break, you could hurt yourself, and everything is really hot, so you definitely want something that's going to get a good grip on those. And this has a nice place here on the bottom because you can put the lip around the jar around the top of it. Then I've got a magnetizer here. This is a tool that we'll use to pull the lids out of the water. And then we've got a tool here. This is a debubbler and a headspace manager. So each one of these little markings here on the side is a 1/4 inch. Today we're going to be packing our jars to a 1/2 inch headspace on the top. That means that the food comes within a 1/2 inch of the top of the lid of the jar, and then we'll fill the rest of the jar up with brine, and that'll be a 1/2 inch on that as well. This back side, we'll use that to pull any bubbles we see in the jar out. Just run that down the side of the jar. If there's any bubbles come up, that way you keep that constant 1/2 inch headspace. Then you want something you can ladle liquid into the jars, and I've got this here. I've also got another type of funnel here, and this has the markings on it as well. If you don't have the tool here, you can use this, and this has a 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, an inch, and you can use that to measure your headspace as well. And then I've got just a regular stainless steel funnel here. I'm gonna go grab one of my jars and we'll get started. All right, I've emptied the water out of my jar now, and I've got a couple of items here that are optional if you want to put these in. You can either put in a whole clove or half of one. These are fairly good size. I'm gonna cut these in half and just use half of a clove, and I'm gonna put that into my jar. And I've got dill seed. This is optional as well. If you don't want to put this in, you don't have to. And I'm gonna put a 1/4 teaspoon into the jar. And then I've got mustard seed, and this is optional as well if you don't want to put this in. I like the flavor that it gives everything, and this is a 1/4 teaspoon of my mustard seed, and they'll go right into the jar. Now we'll take our peppers, and I'm going to grab me a place here for my hand to go on the side because this jar is still really hot, and we want to pack these in here fairly tightly into this jar. So with that, we want to pack this a 1/2 inch headspace on the top, so we're going to use our tool, and we'll come up to the second notch, and that'll give you a 1/2 inch headspace on the top for your food that you're putting in there. All right, now I'm going to grab my funnel and I'm going to put that here, and I'm going to fill it up with the pickling solution. I'm going to use this spoon. I'm going to give it another little stir to make sure that all of that gets incorporated in there. Don't have any of that turmeric on the bottom. And you want to fill that up to a 1/2 inch from the top. Maybe we want to take our debubbler and we're going to run that in there just to make sure we don't have any air pockets on the bottom, and you might have to pack that back down in there again. And you want to take your tool and measure the 1/2 inch from the top with your solution. If you've got that, we're ready to move on. All right, now that we've got our jars filled, I'm going to take a little bit of vinegar and a paper towel, and we're going to clean the top of the jar off. We want to make sure we get a good seal, and this will be another check that you can make sure that none of your jars that you've got have any cracks or chips in them. And then you can look now to see that they're going to have a good seal on the top of that. So we'll set that to the side. We'll grab one of our lids. I'll put that right down on the top just like that. You'll grab one of your rings. And you want this fingertip tight. You don't want to wrench that down on there because we need that to be able to get the air out of it for it to can. So we're just going to go fingertip tight, and then we're going to stop there. put this back in the canister, and I'll go ahead and pack my other ones, and I'll let you know how many I get. Sometimes you might have some peppers that are a little bit bigger than other ones, so I definitely have some extra clean jars ready to go. I just put 2 more into my canner. Looks like I'm going to need a couple more, and I'll let you know how many I get once I get finished packing these jars. I've got all of my jars filled up now, and I did get 6 jars. I put those in the canner now, and I've got that turned up now on high, and I'm wanting that to come up to a boil. Not just a regular boil, we want that to be a rolling boil. Once that comes up to a rolling boil, then you'll put your lid on it. We'll set a timer for 10 minutes, and we'll process those for 10 minutes. Where I'm at an altitude that's below 1,000 feet, so my time is 10 minutes. If you're at a higher terrain, I'll put the link in the description box for the different altitudes and the processing time. So definitely check that out if you're at higher altitude, higher than 1,000 feet, because it does change the processing time on those. Once that timer goes off, or whatever time you've got, or wherever I'm at now here with my 10 minutes, we'll take the lid off, we'll turn off the heat, and we'll let those sit in the canner for 5 minutes before we take them out. So I'll see you back when those are done, and we'll talk further. I'm back, and my peppers have finished processing now, and I've got them out here on a rack to cool down. Now with these, when you're pulling these out of the canner, you want to make sure that you pick them straight up and down. Don't turn them sideways. We want to make sure that they get a good seal on those. If you've got any water on the top of those, that's going to evaporate right off of them. Don't worry about taking that off, because in just a few seconds or a minute or two, all that water is going to be gone because of the heat coming out of there. So definitely, when you're raising those out, just raise them straight up and down. Bring them to a rack so they can cool down. And you want to put them someplace that they're not going to be disturbed. These are really hot, and you don't want anybody to get hurt on those. If you got any children or anybody in the house to come by and touch them, definitely put these away so that they're not going to hurt anybody until they cool down. They need to sit here on this rack for between 12 to 24 hours to cool down, and that will give that an opportunity for that seal to continue on. If you've never canned before, there's a little raised dimple on the top of the lids, and as you pull those out of the canner, you might hear it go pop, 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 and that means that that seal is pulled down in there, and that's a good indication that you've got a good seal. After about 12 to 24 hours, you'll be able to take the bands off, and you take the bands off and pick them up, and if it's got a good seal on the lid on it, then it's good to go. Do not put the bands back on them again. You want to store these on the can shelf with the bands off. That way, if you get a false seal, if for some reason the lid comes loose off of it, there might be enough pressure on that ring to push that back on there, and at that point you've got a false seal of where maybe some bacteria or something could have got in there, and you definitely don't want that to be able to eat those. So definitely store them on the can shelf with the rings off, and they'll be fine. Before you open these up, we want to let these sit for at least a week, and that'll get that pickling solution that we put in there all integrated into those peppers. So just let these sit for a week before you open them up so that they get really nice and tangy. Now depending on how much sugar, if you heard that, that means that that one just sealed. So that's always a good sign when you hear those. So depending on how much sugar if you put in, if you want them on the tartar side, then like I put mine, I put 1/4 of a cup in it. But if you want it on the sweeter side, you could put a little bit more in it. I made a smaller batch today, that way you could test it to see how you like it, and that way the next time when you make those, you can make them how you like them. If you want more sugar in them or less in it, that's completely up to you. If you need to put some more jars, have some jars ready to go, depending on what size peppers you got. If they're a lot wider, you might not be able to get as many peppers in the jar as if they were a little bit smaller. So everything's going to depend on what size peppers you got and how wide you cut them. If you cut them a little bit wider, you might not be able to get as many in the jar, so you'll need more jars to go. So just have some clean, sterile, ready to go. And if you need to, put some into the canner to heat those up, and then continue on. If you need some more brine, you can definitely make that. That's real easy to make, as you saw. Just put together your vinegar, water, salt, and sugar, and heat that up, and then you can keep going as well if you're running a little low on that. So it's very up to you what you come up with on yours. I hope you enjoy this content. If you've never canned before, I'll put the link in the description box below for my basic canning tips and things. You go check that video out. You might find something else in there that I didn't go over today. If you like this content, maybe you might consider giving me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And while you're at it, check out one of these other 2 videos over here on the side. You might find something else you like. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate each and every one of you. And leave me a comment. I'd love to hear how your pickled peppers turned out. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye now.